is. So we are 1 week away from the final deadline. And so instead of inviting a guest speaker today, I thought instead we would try to go through some questions and answers. So basically take a look at what else needs to be done in the remaining week, and then see if you have any questions about your assignments. And then just together think and work on the plan or remaining things that you need to do before the final deadline. And so let me provide a review of the final schedule for the next several weeks technically. So 1 week of the active phase and then several weeks of the reflection phase. So tomorrow is the deadline for your team report drafts. So at this time you will be asked to submit a draft of your report. So not the final version, but a complete report as you have it at this time. And so you will be asked to submit it this time to turn it in. And so once you submit it to turn it in, it will take probably about an hour or 2 hours, but the system will generate a plagiarism report. And so you will be able to see if any parts of your report have plagiarism. And in fact, let me spend a second and show you what that looks like. So if you see my screen, let me go to turn it in. And so we have already quite a few submissions. So I'll show you what they look like when I see them, but then also this time you will also see all that same information on your own. So not many people, as you see, submitted, only 4 submissions so far. So everybody is probably waiting until the final deadline. But then when I log in into the system, I see the submissions and I see that all of these reports are good. So one of them had only 2% similarity, meaning that only 2% of the report have been copied and pasted offline of the internet, and so on and so on. So let's answer, look at, for example, this submission. So it has 14% of copied and pasted material. So this is what you will be able to see for your report. So when you will go into the system here, you will be able to see these percentages here. And so what they show is that, for example, let's click here. This part constitutes 3% of the total report, and it has been copied from somebody else's work at the University of New South Wales, of Western Sydney. And so let's take a quick look and see what that is. So here is a sentence here, and it seems like they just copied it from somewhere. And I'm not sure if there is any more. So it seems like there are a few more things, but those are smaller. And so if I click here, it seems like that's the only thing. So I'm not sure why they call it a whole 14% or 3%. But yeah, I guess if it's a short document and you have one sentence, that may add up to about 1%. And then there was another thing copied and pasted, which is here. And this one's longer. So yeah, I think that University of Western Australia or Sydney, probably there are more sections in the paper itself. But yes, here I see that this part has been copied from the currencyshop.com.au, and so you have this whole sentence literally copied and pasted here. And so when I see this, obviously it's I'm becoming uncomfortable with it, because I can see here the source is not cited, and I'm not sure why not. So they could have said, we found this information and it comes from here, give proper credit to the source, and see if it's still needed. And if it is, yeah, just make it as a quote or as a reference. So there is also something from DOL, I'm not even sure what government it is, yeah. But so again, if I click on this link here, it will take me to the website from where this section of the report was copied and pasted from. And so I think if I go like this, yeah, so that's why it's 3%, because there are multiple sections within the document where students took information from this website. Now, one thing that I would like to check here though, or if I want to, if I were the professor, I would take a look at, did these students find somebody else's work submitted to this University of Western Sydney and then copied somebody else's work, as it looks to be the case? Or did the professor require that these students submit work to the professor, and then the system sees that somebody submitted the work? It doesn't recognize that it was the same student who wrote this report, and it thinks that now the student plagiarized somebody else's work. But in any case, you will have this information. So once you submit your report, you will have the same information, and you will be able to see which parts the system finds and recognizes as copied and pasted. And then you would need to do something about it. And you have basically 3 options here. One, if it's plagiarism, you can just simply delete it and not use it, or write it in, in a different language, not paraphrase, but literally just write it anew from scratch. Either delete altogether or just write a new section that is not plagiarized. Two, if it's a quote, like for example, let's say these people here talked about some currency exchanges and things like that, it may be relevant to the report. Maybe they do need those numbers. Well, there is no problem in saying that we found this information on the website by the Australian government. I think that was this one, right? Number 2. And so these numbers are relevant to us. We want to talk about it. And so we are quoting these numbers, but just know it's not something we made up. We found this information on the website and here is the source. So nothing wrong with that approach. And 3, you can keep what you have, maybe paraphrase, don't use it word for word, but still acknowledge the source. So if you use somebody else's words or work and you change the words a little bit, so kind of change some words so that it's not word for word, you still should cite the source. So for example, if you're saying that I believe that, or you're saying that Australia is comprised of 8 provinces, and you just want to provide a source, even though you didn't type anybody's words word for word, you may say, well, more information about this you can find here, and then cite a website or source or somebody else's publication. So there is nothing wrong with using and referencing somebody else's work. In fact, that's a good practice. I mean, that shows that you've done your research and you know your sources. But just don't forget to provide the sources instead of claiming that that was your own work. So anyway, that's what you will submit this week. And as I said, it will be a few hours and the system will show you the plagiarism report. Hopefully there will be no problems, but if there are any problems, you have time to fix it. You have 1 week before the final report is due, and just use that time to fix the problem. As I said, delete, rephrase, reference, cite, so there are all kinds of options here. Another thing that you need to know when it comes to Turnitin, so only one of you submitted the report or will submit the report on behalf of the team. So which means if the rest of the team wants to see this report, you have to download it and you have to share it with the team. And let me share it one more second just to show you how to download it. So once you open the report, I think it will look something like this. Somewhere here you will have an option to download it. And I think your interface is slightly different than mine, but you should have something like this, like download. And so when you click download, you can use current view, originally submitted file. So let's do the current view, and I think that's the one that will actually contain all the plagiarism information in it. So it will keep the highlighted sections that have been copied and pasted. It will also contain the sources in the margins. Let's take a quick look. And again, your interface may be slightly different because mine here is that of a professor. And so it shows me slightly different work, but I think yeah, it seems like current view just shows me the file. Let me try to do it again. So if I go back to the file, if I go here, I see the play. Okay, yeah, so you open the plagiarism report and then you download it, right? Just a second. Yes, you do it like this. And let's do one more time. Match original receipt, digital receipt, current view, originally submitted file. So technically it should be this current file. Maybe when I download your work, I cannot see it. I only can see it in the browser. But I know for a fact that as a student, you can download your work with all the markings of the plagiarism. So you will be able to see and share that information with your team. Alternatively, if you want, you can share your login with your team. I don't think it's anything, I assume you're using Turnitin only for this specific project. So there is nothing super confidential there. So you can just give the login to the team. They can go directly into the system and see basically the whole report with markings. Oh yeah, no, it is here. So as you see, yeah, so when you download the file like what I chose there, a current view, you have highlighted here the sections that have been plagiarized. And it doesn't seem to provide the address for where it was plagiarized from. We'll check, maybe it will be at the end. But yes, you see right away which sections are problematic and need attention. And yes, so as I predicted, yes, at the end, it does give you the list of sources. So you can see right away where each of those copy and pasted segments came from. And so, yeah, you just download it and share that with the team. Now, we will not be sharing this information with your professors, so don't worry. And in fact, even if we did, it's not a problem. That's why we have this week here. It's not, the goal here is not to punish you. The goal here is to show you where the problems are so you can fix them. So don't worry if your professors or somebody else will see that parts of your report have been plagiarized. Also very important to understand that the system doesn't tell you or tell us when your report has been plagiarized per se. It only says that if any parts of the reports have been copied and pasted. And some of those copied and pasted sections could be legitimately quoted extracts. So which means you quoted somebody's work, you cited the source, you referenced the author, and so that is not a problem. And so the system recognizes that some of that can happen. So it doesn't know if it's been referenced or not. It's not that smart. And so for that reason, we usually assume that a little similarity or some sections that are similar are kind of okay. So as you saw in the reports that I showed you, so we had like 2, 3, 4, 5%, and one had 14% of plagiarism or of similarity statistics. And so usually that is considered okay. So usually up to 15% is considered very good. So as I said, some of those sections could not be plagiarism per se, but maybe it's like a copy and paste of the sentences from the task, the sentences that I wrote when I gave you the task, like that. And so if you see those kinds of things, it's not a problem. But when the percentage gets as high as 20% and higher, that's when we get really, really worried. So that's when the professors become suspicious that you actually did plagiarize your work. And so that's when you can get in trouble. And so we usually don't have many reports like that, but out of about 1,000 teams we have every semester, there would be probably 4 or 5 that literally like half of the report is copy and paste. And then there may be another 10, 20 that have like 20%, so which is not a huge problem, but we are already not comfortable with that. And then everybody else is okay, so it's not an issue. So anyway, that's what happens this week. Several people also asked if they can submit multiple times. So they submitted the report, they saw the problems, they fixed them. Now they want to check the report one more time to make sure that it's okay now. So the answer is that normally we don't want you to submit the report multiple times, but if you have to, it's not a problem, you can. So what you can do is you can just use your other team member, create another report, account and turn it in, and just submit another version of the report using that other account. So technically you can create multiple accounts for each of your team members, for example, or even a second account for yourself just with a different email address, and submit the report one more time and do it that way. Not something that I encourage. As I said, the goal here is not so much to allow you to game the system. So that what some students do, they would change a few words, they would change the order of the words, they would use some synonyms, just replace some words with synonyms. And so if they can see it right away, the feedback, if the system now sees it as plagiarism or not, so if they keep changing the words until the system doesn't recognize it as plagiarism anymore, they think they have fixed the problem. And no, that's not fixing the problem. That's paraphrasing plagiarized content. So my hope is that you will check it once, you will see where the problems are, and then honestly and diligently redo that whole section and do it right so that we don't have to even check it the second time. But if you must, if something, if the circumstances require that you check it twice, you can do it by creating a second account and submitting your work second time. Then next week on Friday, you will be submitting the final reports. So Friday is the deadline, but you can submit. Sharia, you have a question? Unmute your microphone if you have a question. I'll be happy to answer it.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but I had just one question.
Yes.
So, sir, you are aware that our team has chosen UAE as their country, right?
Yes.
So, when we were making the report, so we had mentioned a big section regarding the educational reforms, as we discussed earlier about it. So, the educational reforms have been actually taken from the actual website of the UAE, because we are taking the exact educational reforms, and they are quite vast and extensive, and they may contribute more than 20%. So how do we deal with such plagiarism? And
very good question. So several things here going on that we need to discuss. One, no doubt that you need to mention the educational reform in United Arab Emirates, if that's the country where you propose your school would be operating. So absolutely, you need to talk about that. And so you have several options here. One, I'm not sure if it's a good idea to copy and paste a couple of pages when you talk about it. Chances are it's too long and perhaps too detailed for your client. And so it may be much better if you simply explained the situation or explained that reform in your own words. So you read the source, and then now that you know what it is, you just basically write about it shortly, concisely, to the point, basically summarize the key points that are relevant to your reader. And instead of copying and pasting half of the article of the internet, you just basically explain it in your own words, focusing on the most important things. Even when you do that, you should still cite the sources, not so much to say that I am not claiming somebody's work as my own, but because it's a complex issue and you might want to send your readers to the source where they can find more information and verify what you have said. So you would describe it in your own words, but then you would say, my understanding of this reform or my explanation, description of this reform is based on these sources. And then you say, okay, I learned most of it from this website or maybe from this article or whatever the other sources are. So that would be probably the best and optimal way to go. It does take time, but it definitely would be the most professional way to do it, in a sense, not so much from the plagiarism point of view, but in the sense that you have created the text with your reader in mind. So instead of using somebody else's text that had been written for somebody else, here you focus only on the most relevant things that are relevant to your reader. Second, or the other option is, yes, you can keep what you have. You can keep the whole 2 pages or whatever the text length is. And then before you start, you can say, instead of me trying to explain how that reform is, let me provide you an extract from, for example, the UAE website or ministry website, and then provide the extract and then provide the source. Normally, when we talk about quotes, usually that would be a sentence or two. But theoretically, there is really no, rule against saying that, oh, you cannot, paste 2 pages. So as I said, as long as you explain that you're taking it from a different page, you warn the readers and say, okay, what comes now will be taken directly from the website of, let's say, the Ministry of Education of the United Arab Emirates. And then you literally provide it in quotes, maybe even kind of indent it a little bit so that it's seen as a different section of the report. And then at the end, provide the source. I suppose that's acceptable too. My bigger worry here would be that I'm not sure if your readers need to get that whole massive part section, word for word, many pages, and describe it in the reform. What I see often when people describe a specific country, they would literally copy and paste a whole Wikipedia article. And that is a bad practice, not only because, as I said, copying and pasting is bad, especially if you don't provide the sources. The problem is that the readers don't need to read a whole Wikipedia article about the country. I mean, who cares what, for example, I don't know, political parties they have? Maybe it's not relevant to your report. Who cares how many provinces they have and what the population is and things like that? Maybe it is relevant, but in many cases, when they copy the whole article, 80% of that is completely irrelevant. So here, the bigger question is, do we really need all of that just to have enough pages in the report? Or maybe we should drop it and just select a few interesting points and focus on those. So that's your second option. So you can keep it, you provide the source, but before you do that, think if you really, really need all of that, maybe it should be condensed into a shorter section. And third, probably again, an optimal or another viable option is in the report itself, you say only a few words that are most important. You could say, for example, things like, it's important to understand that that the United Arab Emirates had an education reform in 1995, for example. And so the key changes included this and this and this and this. So before reform, things were done like this. Now the things are done differently. Then you say, relevant to our project, these are the most important issues. And again, you list only a couple of things, maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs. But then you say a more detailed description of this reform is provided in the appendix. And that's where you put the whole 2 pages or whatever the length is. You can put it word to word, and you can literally call it Appendix 1, the description or historic overview of the educational reform in the United Arab Emirates, taken from, and you provide the source website, educationministry.unitedarabemirates.edu or whatever the address is. And so this way, you don't confuse or torture your readers with several pages of description of the reform. But at the same time, if they do need the additional information, if they would like to read more about it, they do have it in the appendix, and they can always go there and read it there. And at the same time, you're not accused of plagiarizing anybody's work. You say, well, no, I needed a description. There is a good one on this website. I took it directly from that website. Here is the source. I'm not claiming that I wrote this section. I'm telling where it came from. And at the same time, if you would like to read more, yeah, that's the source. So go there. So there is a whole website dedicated to the reform or web page. So that would be the best way to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, so, all right. So next week, you will be submitting then the final reports. So it will be due on Friday, not on Sunday as usual. And you will be submitting the final report, and the system is designed in a way that it will not show you the plagiarism report at that time. So it will show it to me, but it will not show it to you. So the professors will see that statistics, but you will not. Can anyone tell me why we do it? Can you guess why we are not sharing the statistics on the final reports? Anyone? Well, nobody's raising hands, so let me tell you. So one, you will not be able to change that report anyway. And so we noticed that in many cases, students would still have some little plagiarized sections. And so when you have over 1,000 teams, obviously when they see that, oh, I thought I had only 2% and it's 5%, then they start getting, upset. They realize that maybe some of the team members still copied and pasted a couple of sentences. And then they start bombarding us, asking if they can resubmit their work, or complaining about the student who still plagiarized the whole paragraph and things like that. And since we cannot really do much about it now, so it's too late. We don't give you those statistics. We sometimes release them much later so that you can still see and learn from it. But at the time of the submission, don't panic when you don't see your plagiarism stats. It's not the intent to provide it in this round. So then on Sunday, so Friday you submit the final reports, but then on Sunday, or by Sunday rather, after you've submitted the final report, you have to submit the final post-project survey. And so that one is the most important one. So there will be no questions about your deliverables. There will be no questions related to research. All of the questions will be specifically about your experience in Xculture. So there will be peer evaluations and a little bit more detailed than usual. We will be asking you about communication in your team, about your experiences in your team, so things like that. This one is extremely important because, one, we want to know how you did, what was going on in your team. We need to know that for one, so we can use that information to improve the project in the future. So we want to learn from your experience and make it a better experience for the students in the future. But also, as you know, at the end of the report of the project, you all will be receiving recommendation letters and certificates. And so in the recommendation letters, we will provide a detailed review of your performance. In fact, one separate document attached to the recommendation letter will be your performance review. And so this final survey is basically your final performance review, at least as far as the peer evaluations. And so we want you to take as much time as needed and want you to be as specific as possible and comment on the performance of each of your team members, so that we can use that information and then provide a performance review to your team members. So we want to know a lot about your experiences in Xculture, about performance of your team members, about your own performance, so that we can use that information for both evaluation and then second, improvement of the project itself. So please take it seriously and please provide that information. It is very important for us. Now, at that point, the project will be over for the students, university students. The only thing that they will still have and do is receive the certificates, the recommendation letters, and at some universities, they will also have presentations. In fact, at most universities, they will have presentations in class. They will talk about their experiences, and some will even have a big award ceremony at the end. For the kids, so for the students in the Xculture Academy program, so kids and professionals, they will still have 4 more weeks for reflection. So during that time, we will have a couple of meetings where we will share the experiences, where we will discuss what you have learned, what you have done, what skills you acquired, what maybe you could have done differently or better. So basically, we will reflect on our experience. And also, you will still be writing a reflection paper. So it doesn't have to be a very long paper, but that will be the paper where you will discuss your experiences, what you did, how you did it, why you did it, how your team behaved, team members behaved, what they did, what did you learn, what could you do differently, and if you were to participate again, would you do anything differently, why, and what exactly that would be. So this way, it's not only you completed the project, you also kind of reflected upon your experiences and learned from it and became wiser and more prepared for a challenge like this in the future. And then at the end, obviously, we will still have presentations. So we will invite our clients and you will present your work to them. It will be sometime in the second half of December. So the students will present their work to the Finnish Schools International and the Experiential School of Greensboro. And so hopefully they'll get some feedback, give you some feedback, as well as hopefully use some of your ideas next year as they operate their schools. And yeah, and in the end, you will receive your certificates, recommendation letters, and then a little bit later, we will know who won the competition, so they'll get an additional award for winning the competition. So that's the plan, that's the schedule. Any questions about that? Anyone? When there are no questions, yeah, sure, yeah, go ahead. You don't have to raise your hand, just unmute your microphone and go ahead with your questions.
Yeah, so in the last webinar, you told us that the invites for the symposium will be out in a couple of days.
Not yet, yes. So they're working on this right now. Like literally every day I get about 20 emails about that. So they already have the schedule, they already have all the details, but have not sent out the invitations yet. So my understanding is that it will be coming out any day. So if not this weekend in the United States, it's a Thanksgiving weekend, so it's like a big holiday. So I know that most professors who are involved in preparation of the event are sort of on a holiday, but my understanding is that it will be going out any day now. And so those of you who will be invited, you will probably get your invitations in the coming few days. All right, so any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm just wondering about additional webinar for Team 2, as like we spoke last webinar.
Yes. So did the coaches contact them? Do you know if did they organize anything?
As I know, my students didn't receive any information about this additional webinar. So they just missed it if it was held.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought it up. The coaches have their own webinar at 10 a.m. my time, so in 25 minutes, and I will be joining them. So let me talk one more time to them and make sure that we schedule that, if not for this weekend, then early next week. So we definitely want to have a meeting. So yeah, thank you so much for reminding me about this. So we have a little situation in the coaching program here, just so you know, kind of to give you a little global, perspective. So the director of the coaching program, Kim Nesper, she is in Northern California at the Pepperdine University. And so that's the place where they have those wildfires. And so if you've seen the news, you know that many neighborhoods have been evacuated, some were without electricity and the internet. And so we had this perfect storm where the person who is responsible for the coaching program and is supposed to kind of attend to these kinds of issues literally was not able to access her home sometimes. When she was able to do so, the electricity and the internet was not always available. And then on top of that, as you remember, there was this shooting in one of the bars. And so several students from her university got killed. And so as you can imagine, something like this also affects your sort of, ability to focus on work. And so some of the things have been a little bit slower than they normally are. But I will be meeting with all of them in 25 minutes, and we'll make sure to bring up the issue of Team 2 and see what we can do about that. So thank you so much for reminding me. All right, well, anything else?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Simon.
Some like 1 or 2 of the companies have shared their digital marketing prices. So how can we understand or compare these prices with the whole digital marketing prices in a city we have chosen?
So you're talking about the section where you recommend this marketing strategy, right? And so when it comes to how much it would cost, you are not sure, and so where you can find that information. Is that what you mean? Well, let's assume that it is. Yes, Erin muted her microphone again. So yes, one of the sections that you will be working on, all of you, so university students, kids, professionals, is marketing. And so many of you, in fact, these days, it seems like almost all recommend that the marketing be done digitally, so online. which is perfectly fine. So Facebook, YouTube, Google AdWords, and things like that. So digital marketing is definitely something that is becoming very popular these days. So the important thing is that instead, or in addition to simply saying, and you should advertise on Facebook, you should provide all kinds of additional information that your clients can use to act on your proposal, on your plan. And so one of those would include also pricing. So simply saying, please advertise on Facebook, or we think it's a good idea to advertise on Facebook or YouTube or whatever other digital platforms you use, that's not enough. More likely than not, they have already thought about that. So what they need is they need actionable, detailed plan so that they can follow it and use your suggestions to implement that plan in real life. And so when it comes to pricing, you can do some research online. Like, for example, if you're recommending that the advertisements are done on Facebook, you literally just, in fact, let me show you here. So you literally can just Google and see how much ads on Facebook cost. So for example, how much does it cost to advertise on Facebook? And you will get some price estimates. I have done it a lot, so I'm familiar with that. So I know that there is no exact, so how much do Facebook ads cost? And you'll get some sort of estimates and you'll get some information. And so I assume there will be some numbers here and you can use it to describe it in your report. Now, when it comes to digital marketing, just a quick, from my own experience, in many cases, there is really no fixed price. Almost all of these platforms, in fact, all of those platforms, they allow you to choose your budget. And so the big question is not how much it costs, but the big question is how much can you cover, or how many people can you reach with the budget that you have. You can literally program it that it shows your ads for $1 a day, but for $1, it will show it only like to 1,000 people a day, and that's it. Then also some audiences are more expensive than others. So for example, if you are trying to advertise it to, let's say, I don't know, rich people in the United States, you choose like annual income over $100,000, must live in the United States, and then whatever other categories. So those tend to be more expensive segments of the market because everybody wants to advertise to them. And so reaching 1,000 people like that may cost you $3, $4, or $5 because everybody wants to advertise to them. And so they sort of have like an auction going on. And so they increase the price until, the price is such that that's how many ads they can show to those people, because Facebook wouldn't want to show 25 ads per day to the same person, right? So they want to space it out a little bit. But at the same time, if you want to show your ads to, let's say, teenagers in some, I don't know, in Africa in general, for example, my experience is that that audience is much cheaper because not many advertisers would like to advertise to that audience. So not many of them are selling products to that region, to that segment of the market. And so in many cases, you can have a much, much cheaper price to reach a certain specific number of people. So that's as far as the price goes. But then you would have to do the analysis and you would have to try to do some estimates as to how much needs to be spent on this. So maybe you believe that in order to work, this ad has to be shown to, 1 million people. And so with the estimated price per 1,000 that you have, let's say from Facebook, maybe that will cost you $1,000. In that case, you will say the cost of your marketing campaign will be $1,000 in advertisement fees. And maybe on top of that, you want to include expenses such as the design of the ad itself, graphics, video, if you use that, maybe some fees that you would pay to the advertisement agency that will do that for you. Or if you decide to do it yourself, maybe, you'll need to buy some books or take some online courses that teach you how to do it. So you add all of that up, and that's going to be your total cost or price of digital marketing and advertisement. So that's how you approach it. So that's important that, again, not only do you talk about the price, but you also provide all the details. Again, if you recommend, for example, Facebook as the advertisement platform, you should explain in a few words or maybe a couple of pages even how it works. You say that, you will be able to select the audience and you can place your ads right in the, in the Facebook account. And, this is how you create that account. And this is how you select your audience. And we recommend that you advertise to people of this age and from this country and with this level of education and with these interests. And, you can choose all of that. And then you can say, and we recommend that the ads will be shown, during this time period and, each person should be showing the ad at least 3 times. And so whatever the other important things would be relevant here, you might want to comment on them. Because as I said, simply saying advertise on Facebook, that's not actionable, that's not enough. So you have to give much more information, much more guidance. And then obviously prices would be one of the subsections in that section of the report. Does that make sense, Cyrene? Did it answer your question, or did you mean something else?
Yes, thank you. I have one more question.
Yes, please go ahead.
When we are making a graphic design for poster or flyers, we take pictures from the internet. Do we put the references for those pictures too?
That's a very, very, very good question. And I'm sure if you ask several different professors, they will give you different answers. So I assume that you will be using some graphics from the internet, and I suppose there is nothing wrong with that. It's important to recognize, if you want to be perfectly, right about it. So when you search for images on the internet, let me show you here. I think you even have an option to choose specifically only the images that are not copyrighted. And so many, if not most, images on the internet are not copyrighted, and you can use it. So the license, they are posted there under the open, the open source license, which means you can use them as needed unless you start making money using that image, in which case sometimes the authors might want to have a piece of revenue. But let's say, for example, you're looking for an image of a, let's say, for example, school, right? Just something simple. So you go to images, and I think somewhere here in the settings, languages, then search, somewhere here you will be able to click, user rights, so usage rights, not filtered by license, and you can choose free to use or share. And so when you choose that option, so all of these images are not licensed or not protected, and basically the authors are fine with you using that image. And so you would take, for example, the school, and so you know that it's not, the author who created this image has no problems with you using it. So if that's how you want to do it, that would be probably the best way to do it. And so if I go again back into the advanced search options and say not filtered by license, you will see that the list of images will be different because some of these images are licensed, copyright protected, and so they were not displayed because of that reason. So like, for example, these 2 schools were not on the list. So that's probably the best way to do it. If you don't want to have any problems, you probably want to do that. So for example, if you see my screen, if I go to the Xculture website, so we have some pictures here. And so those are stock photos that we paid money for. It was like, I don't know, $5 each or something like that. But before that, we had some photos here that we took off the internet. And so it didn't even occur to me that they could be copyright protected. And so some 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, we got an email from Getty Images. Getty Images is one of those companies that manages basically stock photo companies. And they said one of the images on your website is our licensed image. So you have to remove it immediately, or you have to buy it from us, or otherwise we will sue you in court. And so obviously to me, it didn't, I didn't even know that it was a copyright protected image, didn't occur to me. So obviously I removed it the same minute, sent an apology. And so ever since, we don't have many pictures here, but the ones we have, we always make sure that we either buy them. In fact, that's what we do pretty much all the time. But if it's some image that we add in our, for example, Xculture stories, so usually we try to add those here. Again, I always make sure that it's either one of our own images, like this one, I actually took that photograph, or if it's like this one, if I search for it, I literally make sure that it's not copyright protected. So I go and check for that license. So that's what you would do. You can also modify images. So most of them, it's okay if you use them, but you cannot use it in its entirety. So if you use only part of it, it's okay. If you use the whole thing exactly as the original, it's not okay. So there are different kind of types of licenses. And so in that search that I showed you, you can choose what kind of images would be displayed to you. And so this way, if you use an unprotected image, one that does not require a license to be used, obviously you can use it whichever way you want. If you use one that is licensed, you might want to check and make sure that it's either modified or maybe not used at all. Because what can happen is your client will like the image, they will use your poster, they will start advertising with it, and then later they'll get an angry letter from the author and maybe even some sort of a legal action against them, which we don't want. So it's always cheaper to do it right than to deal with the repercussions later on. So does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. Okay, all right. Well, so we're pretty much out of time. We have another meeting at 10 o'clock with the coaches that I need to attend to, and I need to start that one. So if you have any other questions, you know how to find me, or you have your own professors, and then you can also reach out to coaches and they will provide help. And yeah, last week, so it will be the most intensive and busiest time of the semester, but I'm sure you'll do all just fine. All right, well, have a nice weekend, and good luck with your reports.
Bye.
Thank you.